because inevitably there is this little lag here. So Brad, I am going to steal your screen sharing from you for just a second, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Goodbye, Brad's show. And where did Larry's show go? That's not it. That's not it. Let's try that again. I have done this before, everyone, just so you know. Okay, I feel better now. Well, first of all, good evening again. Thanks for being here wherever you may be. And in fact, where you may be, we're where the little gold star is in Seattle overlooking Elliott Bay on this absolutely fantastic day. But we want to know where you are. So if you would, because this is just always fun, put in the chat where you are, how you heard about this, and whether or not this is your first time at an SVC event. And I will mention, but back to Jerry, that Otter. Yes, I'm an Otter customer. I was excited though, because I thought it was Otter, the seaplane, but nothing wrong with Otter, the transcription product. For those of you, and I'm waiting to see your responses in chat there. There we go. Hi, Scott. No, this is definitely not your first SVC event. This is about your 300th SVC event.
Indeed.
But those of you who aren't familiar with the school, just a quick word on what the heck this thing is all about. And we are celebrating coming up, it's ridiculous, the school's 53rd year. Started in 1971 here in Seattle. And this is what we do. We help designers get jobs, or if they already are in jobs, we help them upskill so they can get a better job. That's what it's all about. And what you're seeing here is a group of graduates from the UX certificate program. I believe this was during one of the little moments during the kind of thick of the pandemic where we could all get together safely outside. And so we did. But the question people ask, and it's the right one to ask, it's like, so you help people get jobs. All right, do they get jobs? And the answer is, yeah, they actually do. And what's the thing about it that kind of heartens us the most is that they're not just getting jobs, but they're getting jobs at really very respectable places like some of the organizations that you see here. And this is the quickest of little guided tours, but just to give you a sense of the people who have been through this program and what they're doing now. Many of them came here with some graphic design background, and many of them had none. The average age of a certificate program student here is, well, if you're a 34-year-old woman, you fit the mold perfectly. And this next slide is inaccurate because Basma just left her job at Toyota and is now looking for something new. But she's really a great example of the quality of employer that our graduates are finding themselves being hired at. And she was hired at Toyota working on car interior dashboards, which sounds like kind of the ultimate cool UX job straight out of this program. So if you have any interest in that element, we're going to be having a little get together on Tuesday, July 18th. And if you have an hour to spare, hop onto the website, book yourself a spot, and we'll see you then and tell you more about it. Okay, that wasn't too bad, right? For somebody who's been known to talk endlessly. So, but I'm not going to, because we have an incredibly wonderful, knowledgeable guest speaker here this evening, and I want him to own the floor. So I'm going to hand you off to Brad Fenstermacher, who does not require that you are able to spell his name. But you should know a little bit about his background. He is currently a lead designer at Wong Duty. And if that name is not ringing a bell, please make a note to go spend some time on Wong Duty's website after we're done here tonight. They have been a huge, huge part of the creative scene in Seattle for 25-ish years, thereabouts. And there aren't that many advertising agencies, which is what they absolutely were over most of their history. There aren't that many firms that have successfully made a transition into the digital space. And Wong Doody didn't just make a successful transition, they kind of remade the firm over the last few years, now as a partner and one of the affiliates of Infosys, enormous global firm, and they are just kicking all kinds of butt. So what Brad is bringing to Wong Doody and will bring to you here tonight is his experience not only there, but before that as a senior designer with Nike and T-Mobile. So he's got some pretty impressive credentials and has worked on some tremendous brands over his career. He's a graduate of the University of Washington in marketing and information systems, and then got an MBA that I think we would all like this MBA in marketing and sports business from probably the best place in the country to go learn about this, and that's the University of Oregon. So he, as I say, brings a lot to this party, and I think we should get the party started. So Brad, I'm gonna stop sharing and hand this one off to you. And thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Oh my gosh, I am absolutely honored to be here, and that so many of you have taken time out of your evening to join this session. I sincerely hope that we make it worth your while here, and encourage you, please, while Larry will be probably helping to moderate, please ask questions, please. And if I don't answer them right away, I will, I promise. This is all about getting you exposure to things that you're interested in. So if you find that we're veering off that track, raise a hand. I want to make sure we keep this fun. We'll keep this light. The goal here is talking about getting beyond the wireframe, and I do like that as just kind of a statement. Because it means quite a bit, and I'll talk about that here in a minute, because I've been through the journey, not unlike many of you, having to go back and learn many of these things in the digital space and bringing all of this together. And so as the firm here transitions, and as I have in the past, hopefully bringing some of those pieces together and recognizing that maybe things that you've done outside of this space are useful and helpful and different, distinct and interesting. So without further ado here, just a quick intro about me, and then we will move on, because this is not about me. But yes, I've been at this a long time. All of what I have done in my career has revolved around designing products and strategies, often marketing, not always, sometimes service-related challenges, major brands, startups, nonprofits, you name it. My path, absolutely not a straight line at all, some side tracks, but a lot of great people along the way. And that's made a big difference for me. One of the most important things I've learned, I guess, along the way is just, I like to keep learning. I like new challenges. It's the thing that gives me most energy, except where I choose to live. I love to travel, but I've lived my whole life here in the Northwest, as you can probably tell by the schools I went to. And of course, I have no friends at either one because I went to both. But fun fact, I was once caught on top of a volcano during a lightning storm. I have a few others like that. I've certainly had some interesting times at work, and away from that, I will do my best to not bore you with a bunch of corporate slides here. My plan is for you to leave here with more questions and ideas than answers. And hey, if I fail on those two and you call me out on it, don't do it during the presentation. But if you do, hey, I'll buy you a copy. So here we go. Where do we start? Well, that's a tough question sometimes with something like this. Let's kind of start with something here that may feel really, really basic and fundamental here. But you know, I often put this in front of our clients as well, because mindset is really critical when we're trying to get into that creative space and kind of break out of this mold of process. There's time for process and protocol and standards and everything else, but they are not the only thing we have in our toolkit, and not the only thing that brings value to the table. And so, ask them, it's a dumb question, right? It's a dumb question. Did Starbucks get great at grinding coffee for the sake of grinding coffee? Obviously not, right? They didn't set out just to make a cup of coffee either, though. They designed an experience around that. They did it with profit in mind. You work back from there, right? This is really critical. Some of you may go, well, yeah, of course, we know this, and hopefully I'm not spending too much time on something that you feel like you've already got a solid grasp on. But I really want to emphasize this, that it's really, really important to know where you're trying to go, even if it's not crystal clear, and have some sense of what those outcomes are and the context you're in. And we work in a number of these spaces, and as we have evolved, we've found ourselves learning along the way quite a few things as to how things differ. With a creative background, of course, we're used to having a lot of space to throw things against the wall and try different things. And if you do go spend any time looking at our history here at Wong Duty, you will see some things that might even include Tracy Wong, our founder, in a fish costume laying on the top of the case at the Pike Place Market. That's our personality. Everybody's got their own going into things. But my point here really is this. Starting out here, we have to understand who we're serving with our efforts. And while we don't use these entirely as constraints, they do give us some guidance as we go, so we can focus our thinking, so that it won't wander all over the place. And we can be designing things that are consumer facing. We can be designing things that are business facing. We can be designing things that are employee facing, partner facing. We have one, I think, just spun up recently, where it's working with a major brand that has franchisees that bottle their beverages, and building something that is designed to make their experience better as they work to become not just more efficient, but also better at representing that brand out in the market, in the areas where they own their franchises. So there are a lot of different spaces we play in. And there's also a lot of culture that we see that's relevant. And whether you've been out there in the workforce working for companies in-house, whether you've worked for firms like this one that work across a range of clients and industries, there are some things that, or if you haven't, there are some things that are really important to note, and to think about while you are considering where to press on things, where to test boundaries, where to look at the possibility of doing things that go beyond just the textbook way of thinking. And we see organizations, we certainly have clients that are very big and siloed. I know some of your alumni have gone to work for some. I certainly have worked for some under contract and other arrangements as well. And they have their own unique challenges. Marketing doesn't necessarily work closely with retail. That doesn't necessarily talk all that much to technology. That they own multiple aspects of the brand and what it does out in the market and how it interacts with people, and yet they each kind of do their own thing. And they're you might be surprised how many things are held together by some relatively loose threads. Some of these startups and smaller organizations, very scrappy, and the mentality and the personality and the everything that goes into then, if you're designing for them, it can be quite different. And figuring that out is really important, because it allows you to relate to them more quickly, and start to anticipate maybe their thinking. And that works in two ways. One is anticipating things that you need to get ahead of, so that you can have valuable and good conversations with them that bring out ideas and bring out new concepts and things from them, because it's not always going to come from you. In your mind, if you're really good at this, you get people that you're working for and working with to produce many of those ideas and help them craft and build those. But you also look out for the things that the traps that they fall into. the assumptions they make, the things they think they know that they maybe don't know. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen this or have heard other people talk about or bemoan this. It is very common for our clients to say, oh, we already know our customers. We don't need to do research. We know our users. If I'm entirely perfectly honest with you, sometimes we lose that battle pushing back on that. It's just the nature of the work and we have to adapt to that. But I can tell you, going into every single engagement, it is a priority for me to put that in front of them and push them to make that investment and convince them that maybe don't know everything you think you do, or maybe there's something we'll learn from that that's going to be valuable. So, without going too far off on a tangent there, which I'm prone to doing sometimes, I'll just look at the next couple things here as another couple examples of personalities of organizations where people. It's important to recognize, ask, assess, do they play it safe? Are they kind of a conservative, careful group of folks? What is their brand's personality out there? Are they slightly daring? Are they willing to take some risks? If they're not, how can we still do things that are maybe a little bit beyond what's obvious, that still feel right for them? So there are many, many other facets of our clients and their personalities that we assess, but I can't emphasize enough the importance of assessing these things and considering them as you go. And I'll speak to that a little bit more as we move through here. And of course, this is a practice that is pretty common in the industry here, and is one that while I probably can annoy the heck out of many clients with it, it's also one that I value quite a lot. I ask why a lot, because I want to understand what's actually behind this. When we're trying to get a customer to do something, what do we want them to do? We want more foot traffic in our stores. Okay, why is that? Well, we want to increase sales. Okay, well, why do we want to increase sales in that store or those stores? Well, because their sales numbers are dipping. Okay, well, why are they dipping? Well, because there's construction. Well, how is anything we're doing going to help with construction? Or another reason, maybe it's because people aren't aware of that location. It's new. Maybe there are so many different directions that can go, and it can open up so many different lines of thinking around, well, what are the things that we can do then? That are just beyond the core basic things that we might think to do in kind of the center of a design, for whether it's a website, an app, an ad campaign, whatever it is that we're doing. And as we go through things a little bit more, I'm going to also show you some thoughts I have around things that not getting too caught up in any one of those spaces, even though a lot of our roles, oftentimes we have projects, we have titles, we have responsibilities that are focused on very specific aspects of what a business is doing, whether it's their web design, whether it's an application that serves their employees, whether it's a product that they roll out to mobile phones, whether you name it, right? It's very easy to get caught up in thinking purely about that. And it's difficult in some organizations to get any conversation going that can break down some of those walls between all of those different channels that are ultimately interacting with the customer. The customer doesn't care, right? That you've got internal structures and politics and history and inefficiencies and whatever. We always encourage folks to try anyhow, to push, to ask. You'd be surprised how often sometimes people go, oh, wow, I hadn't thought about that. Oh, maybe you should go talk to this person. Everyone's a little different in how they do that, but this is where that starts, is really trying to get to the bottom of what the issue really is, whether it's a problem, a challenge, an opportunity, you name it, right? There's something there that's at the base, at the core of that. And it gives us a better understanding of not only what we're trying to accomplish, but what we might also be able to think of beyond that. And that's where the creative piece comes in. So, as I kind of alluded to before, you get a handle on these things, and then this is the part that often gets forgotten because we get right after solving the problem. But we like to look for ways to stretch. We like to look for ways to break down walls when we can. Sometimes we're more successful in doing that than others. Some of our clients and some of the organizations I've worked with have been more open to that than others. Sometimes that varies from department to department, manager to manager. But that's really one of the central points here that I'm hoping to share more thoughts with you on and help you see, or at least, as I said at the outset, spark some ideas. I would much prefer you leave here with questions and ideas and thoughts kind of spinning and more things coming into your mind later than feeling like I tried to answer questions for you because my answers may not be your answers. So let's talk a little bit about touch points here. We sit down and we do our wireframes, and we've been given a specific problem. We need to design a new site for a new organization. We need to design a new dashboard for a department within a large corporation. We need to design an app that can enable people in a retail store to better serve their customers as they're walking around the store. We design a mobile experience that's meant to enhance something that people experience out in the world, whether it's at a ballpark, at an entertainment venue. I mean, there are all these different things, and we get right after that. And our wireframes, of course, are central to that process. This is how we rapidly iterate through creating concepts, putting them in front of our customers, our clients, and getting feedback on those. And it's hard enough getting them to understand what these are sometimes. Oftentimes spend a fair amount of time explaining the purpose and the point of these and putting them side by side with style tiles or mood boards or other things that can help give a little bit of color to it. But one of the things, again, that we kind of get lost in is there are a lot of other places that you name the organization is touching a customer, a user, someone who is being served by the organization in some way. We certainly have things that are traditional audio or advertising channels. We have products themselves that are a major touch point that often gets forgotten. For those of you who can remember some of the kitchen appliances that had real buttons on them, that they actually had this solid feeling of pushing and clicking, and you felt like you were actually doing something, versus some of the ones now where you push and you're not sure if you've actually activated anything unless it lights up and beeps at you or plays half of a symphony. These are all things that are designed as parts of experiences and that sometimes can be very disconnected, but shouldn't be forgotten. In our B2B situations, we certainly have people at workstations, but most of our wireframes are over in this corner alone. This is where we're focused. We're building websites, we're building apps, we're building experiences on devices like these. And sometimes if we're really lucky, we end up in a situation where we're designing dashboards, real dashboards in cars, not just dashboards that are showing financial results and charts and data. But most of the time, this is where we are, and where we have opportunity to stretch then is to look outside of these and think, okay, well, again, going back to what we're actually trying to accomplish. If we're building an app that is designed to make onboarding with a physical product, easier, what is it that we can do about that that's going to make that easier? Well, there are certainly things we can do that we design within the app, features. Maybe they can scan a code on the back of the machine that kicks off the process. But do you still have a paper instruction book that comes with it and nothing else? Do you have the ability to affect maybe how someone feels about this by giving them information or the ability to control things? Again, these become sometimes difficult to do in the real world if you have large organizations that aren't well connected internally across these boundaries. But it doesn't mean those conversations shouldn't happen. And the same is true when we talk about any of our advertising. And this is a this is, as Larry alluded to, there's a lot of change happening in this space. Yes, there are still some traditional advertising agencies, particularly smaller ones that are working on a local level. Most of the larger ones have been acquired or have disappeared. There are some very, very large players out there, and all of them are trying to figure out in one way or another, from whatever direction they're coming at it, how do we bring this creative element into this digital space where most of the digital work has been historically very structured, following a lot of patterns, and maybe gets a little bit of feel from some content or from some design systems that give us a flashy logo or some nice looking elements that we can work into our page, things like that. But they're, excuse me, they're, and on the flip side, all of our creative folks are like, what on earth are you doing over there? And how do we actually become a part of that? And it's happening here still. It's an ongoing thing where we sit down and talk about and put heads in a room and go, how can we make these things play together? If we're trying to run a campaign that's going to punch up sales, what are we doing over here that might actually be able to help that happen, right? If we are trying to make a process easier for customers, what are we doing down here in the retail space that's actually going to make that happen? And there are lots of things that we don't even think of. We certainly have some creative minds here that come up with some unusual things at times, and that's not unique to this organization. I'm not endorsing graffiti, but there are sometimes you'll see things that happen out there on the street, permitted or not, that are meant to be part of an experience that customers have, and they should be part of the broader conversation, because if we're going to be launching something and we need to create awareness, we've got people here that are experts at creating awareness, but we oftentimes don't connect those dots. So it becomes to a question of who really owns those touch points. This is my kitten, Spud, actually my daughter's kitten, Spud, but who owns them? Well, as I mentioned earlier, right, with these large organizations, they can be kind of broken up and fractured, and it makes our job tougher because we have to try and figure out ways to make these conversations happen, and they're not always successful. But I'm sorry to say, if you said it's the users, you probably need to cut back a little on the Kool-Aid. I'm usually very positive on things like this, but do beware. We want the users to be the ones who have a voice. We have to give them that voice. And that is someone else owns these things, and usually they hold them pretty close. So it takes some work to get these conversations to happen sometimes. Newer organizations, smaller to mid-sized organizations, of course, it's easier to make that happen. Not maybe quite as much budget. So there you go. You have to get creative in that regard. The large corporations, that we work with, often it's not a budget issue. They might say they don't have any. That's not true. It's just where they're choosing to invest at the time. But things, as I mentioned, can be very divided all the way up to the C-suite in many, many cases. So trying to get things to happen across these boundaries isn't always easy. But as I will say over and over again, it doesn't mean you can't look beyond what you're doing and look at possibilities to extend your impact, because as you are thinking about these things as a designer, as you are digging into why are we doing this? Who are we doing it for? What's the point? What's the value? All those why questions, you're going to start to see things that say, if you give yourself a moment to think about it and you challenge yourself to do so, I guarantee you'll start wondering, why are we not doing something over there too? Why aren't these campaigns linked? Why do we have an app that feels this way over here and feels that way over there? Why is this experience so great when someone walks in the door, but is so terrible when someone calls on the phone? And the chatbot they had us put in our site is meant to chase people away, not help them. There are so many things like that you'll see, and the role, the importance, the value in the role is that you spot those things and ask them and figure out the right people to ask. That last part's probably the hardest part of the whole gig. But even if you're designing B2B employee software, anything, there's always some boundaries to test there. There are always things that need this type of thinking. Just kind of off the cuff here, if we think about the case I mentioned earlier, where a bottling franchisee, what's the situation? What's the work situation they're in? If they're trying to interact with a system that you have, do they even have hands free to do it? Are they at a desk? Are they at a mobile? We can get insight into some of those things, but we might actually find that there's something outside of our site that would assist them in having a better experience there. It might be implementing some sort of voice activated interface, right? These are things that, while they become in hindsight a core part of our design, we look back and we show them off and we go, here's the whole package. The truth is that it would have been very easy in many of these cases just to sit down and draw out a website and the sections of the site and the navigation, built on whatever information architecture we needed to have behind that. And here's your wireframe, here's your style tiles, here's your prototype. Okay, devs, go build it, and off we go. But yeah, I'm not going to tell you to think. Hopefully you'll get the hint here. Spud happens to like his boxes. I'm not personally a fan of them myself, but that's the deal, right? We've got to figure out who owns these things. We've got to figure out how to test our own thinking and use it to challenge the thinking of the others that we're working with, because there's a lot of strength and possibility in what we can do from where we're seated, usually in an organization, even if it's not up very high, just by virtue of what we get to get close to, what we get to ask, what we get to see, and what we bring to the table in terms of knowledge as problem solvers ultimately, but as creatives as well. So I want to kick it back to Larry really quick here, because he shared with me just the coolest example of this at just a very fundamental level, and I love it. And I want to make sure everybody here gets to see it. Is it easiest for me just to keep these and for you to tell me to move to the next slide?
Yeah, with the exception that I don't remember what order they're in. So we'll make it work.
Here's the first one here, introducing the client there, and then I believe you'll get into the specifics of what the project was.
Right. Well, many of you are well aware that we do this capstone class as part of the certificate program, and it's where we form small teams, and the teams solve a problem, a UX problem for an actual client, for profit or nonprofit. And we've always done this because we know that hiring managers want to see real work in a portfolio for an entry-level job. So Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, for those of you who aren't from this area, it's a ferry boat ride away. I'm pointing at it over there, 8 miles away. It's a bedroom community, essentially, of Seattle. And a rather wealthy woman living over there decided this little place needed some culture. And so she funded the building of this museum, which is really quite spectacular. Way more than you'd expect from I think the population there might be 20, 30,000. It's not a lot. So they came to us. We worked with them, set them up as a capstone client. And they had not a really, bizarre design challenge, but it had some elements. There was some stuff there they could work with. So the deal is, in the nonprofit world, in the arts world, these various organizations, art museums, opera companies, ballet, you name it, theater groups, they share direct mail lists. And makes sense, right? Because if you're the kind of person who maybe went to the Seattle Art Museum, or even maybe went to a play at Repertory Theater, you might be the kind of person who would go to a different theater or a different gallery or museum. So they pool their direct mail lists, email lists, I should say. The problem was Bainbridge Island Museum of Art charges no admission. You just walk right in. And so there was no touch point, like Brad was talking about, where you could interact with the visitor and say, hey, could we have your email address? Because since they had no email addresses to give, they couldn't join this collective. So they needed to get, I think, at least a list of 3,000 in order to get the other list back. So that was the assignment they came to us with. And if you put it in the form of a how might we statement, it's pretty straightforward. How might we collect the email address of visitors to our museum without interrupting kind of the easy flow that they already had going because it was free admission? And guessing that the next shot, yep, is going to be what, as you can imagine, most students just gravitated to this, which is, well, you need some sort of a app that would live on a tablet, and you could set up little kiosks. And, you know, now I think, I'm not sure if this was the case at the time, but if you sign up with Constant Contact or any of the, you know, kind of bigger email services, they already have this app that you can put on your tablet. So I'm not sure we were really reinventing much of a wheel here. So this was what it looked like. Ultimately, the one of the proposals that one of the students did, they went ahead with it. And I think they set up 2 or 3 of these kiosks when you came into the museum. Pretty straightforward, pretty good idea. Definitely worked. But one student presented her notion for what this app might look like. And I'll just mention, by the way, that one group working on this did take it that kind of next step, in that they mapped out a floor plan and really kind of did more of an architectural study of traffic flow and where should these kiosks be placed. So that was like, okay, that's good. That is thinking beyond the wireframe. But one student went way beyond the wireframe, and her notion was this, and it was, we're an art museum, and so what if we engage visitors to create some art? And her thought was that they could commission a local artist to design the framework for a crowdsourced piece of art. And the deal was, if you gave us your email address, we'll give you a component to add to this piece of art. So I think on the next slide, nope, that's showing the strategic locations. Here you go. Now, they never implemented this, so this is a kind of close approximation. So what you see behind these people is a collage that was in a similar way created by a community. But the student's idea was, again, we'll trade you a piece of this art. You can go put it on the bigger piece of art wherever you think it goes, in trade for your email address. And when I first heard this, I thought, that is so great. You know, that is really keeping your thinking and your creativity going beyond the usual digital deliverable that most people do. And that's what most portfolios contain. So I applauded her and said, this is just outstanding. Well, on the night of her portfolio presentation, I was quite eager to see what the hiring managers we brought in would think of this idea. So she's presenting her case study and left this out. And it's like, I asked her later, it's like, why did you do that? And she said, well, you know, I figured they want to see my digital chops, and it's not digital. It's very analog. And I said, ooh, I think maybe you missed an opportunity there. And so what I recall was I wrote the panel, and these are professionals who come in to listen to your portfolio presentation, and said, there's a piece of this you didn't get to hear, and send it out to them. And they went crazy over it. They just were so thrilled at that kind of extra effort that it just really moved the meter, and it stuck in their minds as this is, you know, maybe not a great idea in execution, who knows, but they really loved the process, and they really loved that added thinking. So if given the chance, I'm always going to advocate to people, like, think in these terms, think beyond that wireframe. And I just felt this was, of all the portfolios we've seen students create here, this is by far the best example. And I think, Brad, what did you say when I showed this to you?
I don't remember what I said exactly, but I was just like, oh, that is awesome. That is exactly the kind of thing that I just love to see when it shows up, because it stands out so much in that there's so many times where we see, as you said, the digital deliverables are what they are. They need to be what they are because the work has to get done. But this sticks out as something, okay, if I'm visiting the museum, now you know, like anything else, right? When you start testing boundaries and trying new things, and I was just having a conversation with a client this morning about this, like, hey, look, this concept is pretty new. I can't even show you another example of anybody doing this exactly this way, but that's what's so great about it. However, I can't tell you for sure how people are going to respond to it. We'd have to do some research for that, but this is no exception to that, right? I can't tell you for sure how people would have responded to this, but my gut feel is that it would definitely get attention. People would be curious about it. They would tell other people about it. You know, hopefully that's the result you would get. I certainly would expect it to do things that simply wouldn't happen without it. And people are so used to being, you know, pestered about things in the digital space, whether they're asking for survey feedback, your email address, subscribe here, you know, sign up there, that when something is different than that, and especially if it's in the real world and you can actually touch something, that's the thing I think I love the most. Was just like, okay, someone actually gets to touch and do something, and it's not on that little black screen. And so that was, I guess, the long explanation of what was going through my mind at the time.
I neglected to mention one element of this, which is obvious from this image. Again, they didn't ever execute this, but she pointed this out. It's like you're getting those email addresses, number one. You're involving the visitor in the creation of art. That's never a bad thing, but they're also building an Instagram background as they go. And it's like, boy, can't beat that. Anyway,
yeah,
that's the
doing
story.
things on multiple fronts there. And you know, again, that goal, that was the other thing I think that stuck out to me too, was it all came back around to what's it actually going to take to get these email addresses. Maybe people aren't going to be so willing to give them up, and you're not going to have as easy a time if you don't have to get them to buy a ticket to come in. And I actually didn't even know that part. If you mentioned it, I missed it. Okay, so you had to create a place and give them a reason. That is not an easy problem to solve. This is a pretty cool solution to that.
Yeah. Well,
and it fits with who they are too. It's on brand.
When they studied the traffic flow, it was like you could just walk in without interacting with anybody or anything. Just walk in, no tickets, no nothing.
Yeah, that is not an easy one. I love the idea that it creates art. You're digging right into the reason that people are probably there in the first place, that they have some interest, love, curiosity, something. They're there for a reason. If you can tap into that, all the better. And we look for places to do that as well out there in the world. Again, the opportunities can be somewhat more limited in certain spaces when we're designing stuff for people to use at work versus things that are trying to get to consumers in their home, out on the street, in a retail space. But it doesn't mean there isn't something there. You just sometimes have to think harder, and sometimes it's maybe a little bit more plain. It still might have value. So I've got some other examples here. These are going to look a lot different, but let me just pause before I go into them and just say again, that last example stands out and is reachable. And it doesn't have to be huge and glitzy and full of tech. I'm going to show you some things that are, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's the thought that went into it. It's that thing that cracked that barrier between, you know, who are these people? Who is this serving? What is it for? What's it going to take to get it? It's that thinking that stands out. It's not how it looks exactly. It's not whether it was actually executed, although it is always nice to see something that that's been that are real world deliverables. But it's that critical thinking piece and the fact that those dots are all connected, and that's a big deal. Here's one, and of course Larry mentioned my background in sports, so I'll start there. This is kind of a big example, and it's more conceptual at this stage, although there are multiple organizations working on this in different places. Mixed results so far. It's difficult to pull off, but we talk about sports fans, and this applies at all levels, not just the major franchises in the huge stadiums and arenas. But there are huge opportunities to do things there that can change this experience. Samsung has this thing that they call a venue experience redefined, and of course, their purpose, and if you were to think about this as someone working for them, their purpose is to try and think of things that will employ their products. They have a slightly different angle on this than someone who's maybe trying to craft something from scratch and figure out what technology to use. But the point being that there are so many different places that you might find yourself trying to solve these types of problems or come up with these types of concepts. But it's the franchises and these venues have had sites that'll sell you tickets for years. You used to have to print them off. Now you don't necessarily have to do that. You can get scanned in now, great. But wow, that experience, the connected elements of it are kind of dead right there. You have other places that you can use your technology, and you can do things that are improved over maybe what they used to be, paying with your phone for food, things like that. But wow, there's a lot missing there. They just basically kind of stopped in their design for the most part with tickets and merch. And some of the things that they've started to point out here, and you can see some different things if you look at Premier Soccer League and other venues in other parts of the world trying to attack this from different angles depending on who their fans are and what they want and where they live and how much they're spending to be there in the first place. But we know parking is a pain. If you even bother to try and drive to an event at all, the airports are starting to kind of figure this out and starting to spend money on some pretty expensive tech to maybe show you where an open parking space is. But there are certainly other things that can be done there. If it's part of the overall experience and it's associated with the franchise or the venue, it's a lot more convenient and powerful than it is if it's something that feels disconnected from that. Same thing is true if you're watching the game. If you're pulling up ESPN's app to look at stuff, it's not connected to what you're doing, but you want to see the score of another game. You want to look up stats, you're looking at a roster, whatever you're looking at. There's a lot of potential coming up with AR, of course, but even just some basic things like, giving me the ability to perhaps order something, see a promotion come up on a screen and entice me to spend more money, or order at a time when there's a lull in traffic at the concession. And maybe the advantage of doing so is that it's delivered to me, or maybe it's just easier for me to go down and grab it and not stand in line. Some of these things are more expensive and more technologically difficult than others. But, this is a venue where there's just loads and loads of opportunity. It's a little surprising to me that there hasn't been more investment in this. You see some of the new arenas are starting to show a little bit more. But think about it this. The reason I put this in here, though, is to not just think about the venue and the team and their perspective on this, but it's interesting to me to see a corporation like Samsung taking this approach and saying, hey, we're not just trying to sell a bunch of LED screens, LCD screens, cameras, whatever it is that we're hawking there, right? We're going out there and we're saying, look, there are parts of your experience that have major gaps in them. And here are ways that we can use our technology to bridge those gaps and make that better And it goes beyond just what your website's doing right now. It goes beyond just thinking about what happens when you put a bunch of screens up and display, show the game while you're standing in line so you don't miss anything. There's a huge amount of other stuff that can happen, but it takes some creative thought, and it takes people attacking these things from different angles to come up with some of these ideas, because clearly they're not happening very quickly from the inside. If we take a look at another one here, this one is, of course, when you have this kind of money, you can do some pretty amazing things. But again, there are other reasons that I put this in here. If any of you are big Disney fans, you probably are familiar with this, but it's relatively new. This concept, this magic band, they've rolled out some things that you can do in apps on your phone. They have a couple levels of this, but knowing these customers, you start to understand that first of all, they're going to collect these things. So they have all these different themes that they've built into this, and the creative folks have obviously seen how they can tap into different personas out there and what might be appealing to them, whether it's history, whether it's being a mom, whether it's having a favorite character, you name it, right? But these environments, again, while they are designed to be experiences, this is what they are. They've fallen short historically, even the best of them, when it comes to their digital capabilities. Their websites are often beautiful, but they don't extend a whole lot of functionality. Disney's gotten a lot better at this in the last couple of years. Their site's gorgeous now. But even then, you look at some of the things that they focused on, and it is kind of inside out. Again, they like to say that they're very focused on their fans, and they are in many cases. When we talk about some of these fractured organizations and their thinking, the people that are creating the content, the ones that are deciding what the rides are supposed to be like, the ones that are putting these characters out there, they are fully tuned into what people visiting, fans are into. The ones that are working on the digital tech side oftentimes seem to be a little more challenged in that regard, or looking at things more operationally. And this may be a function of where budgets come from. It may be a lot of things, but the start was really, well, how do we lessen wait times? And that's great, but it's pretty siloed and a lot more seemingly about efficiency rather than really joy. If nothing else, it's just trying to lessen frustration. This concept is really cool because it does a lot more than just help you move more quickly through, get in, eat more easily, maybe skip some lines, some of the things like that. You can pay for food, but you can also, if you stay in the hotel, you can unlock the door to your room. What I really like, though, is where they went beyond the obvious stuff there. And there are a couple of things in particular that I wanted to call out. One is this just incredibly neat thing that they did, where you have a certain set of fans who are going to really, either want to effectively feel like they've collected something, they've seen all of everything, or they have every single one of something. They have these 50 characters spread out through all 4 parks. Very strategic concept here, in that they want to get people to go to all 4 parks if they're looking for these things, and a certain set of people will absolutely do that. But they also created this cool thing where if you wave your hand at them, actually on your device, you can get different reactions and different behaviors that you can see. And so there's an interactive experience to that. The other one I really love is the fact that these have a multimodal component that goes beyond just that visual piece. They actually have some haptics built into these things, so that for example, with Star Wars, you'll get vibrations as you're hunting for bounties. They have things that light up when you're watching certain late night shows. Again, this is like wow, if I had all the money in the world, could do this. But the takeaway from this is that they didn't just stop at the obvious stuff of how do we get people in the gate faster? How do we, make it easier for them if they're trying to pay for stuff? How do we deal with our frustrations around people being stuck in line? They went and said, all right, and how else do we get some of these people who are, and look at different people's interests when they come to the park, what they really like to do, what's going to motivate them to go to different corners of the park. And ultimately that means spending more time and more money, which is what they're after in the end. And so, even if you go back and think about something on a more, more basic level, if I'm trying to solve a problem in a retail store, say it is, my returns process is terrible. And it's really hard for people to do that because they just have to come and stand in line and wait. So I create the ability within an app for them to be able to start that process. That's great. And I can solve that problem. But if that is going to result in them coming in the door, what else can we do? What else can we do? What can we do for us? What can we do for them? Those sorts of questions should be asked, because just solving that one problem and just creating that one feature, adding that to our app, to the things that are obvious of, shopping, purchasing, everything that's core to that, what else could we have them do? What else could we offer them there? Maybe there's an experience they can have that would result in them sharing something on social media, spreading word about something, you name it, right? So that's the more important point here, is that they created a couple things that people are more likely to talk about, share, get them to go do more things beyond just solving those obvious problems there. This is just from last month. It's recent. And this is, again, big budget, right? It's cool to look at. Essentially what this is that Gap and Mattel, with the Barbie movie coming out, I can't imagine any of you have missed the promotion for that, because it's everywhere. But if you missed it somehow, they have a live action Barbie movie coming out, and this is a big event trying to get people to know about it, share about it, talk about it, go see it. We've got 3D billboards and things. This AR is not necessarily new, but there's been some limitations in what can be done there. And what's cool about this is that we have a couple big advances. And the reason I put this one in here is just to show that this is constantly changing. And so we have to stay on top of these things to know, where are these new opportunities going to be? Because if we don't know what's new and available out there, someone else is going to figure it out, or we're just going to miss it outright. And our company, our client, whoever we're working for is going to potentially miss a big opportunity. In this case, it is that we've got these advances coming right now from Adobe and Google, that you don't have to pre-download an app. That's a pain, that's friction. You can spontaneously do that. That's a huge thing that we want people to be able to do out there, is we want them to be able to be spontaneous, see something, react, have minimal friction, right? Whether that's in trying to accomplish a task, or whether it's just curiosity about something like this. And what's happening now is these things are finally getting the ability to be aware, geospatially aware. So in this case, you have this Gap store in your Times Square. If you scan this code, all of a sudden hold your device up, you get this little, what essentially is, if any of you are familiar with what's coming with Apple and Google, they're essentially mini apps. Apple calls them app clips. I'm trying to remember, smart apps or something. I can't remember what the Google one is off the top of my head. Anyway, they're designed specifically to give you something that you can download quickly without a lot of friction. They stick around for, say, 30 days. They have limited features, but you can take them and run with them and do some stuff like this with them. And so this thing's smart enough to know it has this geospatial anchoring here that you can tag all these things to, so that they show up the same. For the experience is consistent for everybody. Things show up where you want them to be. But go check it out if you haven't seen it, or if you have a chance, go check it out. It's pretty cool. But again, the point here is don't don't miss when new things are coming. It's always hard for me to show off work that somebody else has done, even when it's really cool, because we're doing cool stuff here too, but it's not about that. It is certainly not about egos. It is about paying attention to what stuff's changing out there so that we can continue to ask questions, new questions, fresh questions, and look for new ways to break down those walls. A quick note here, what about AI? Everybody is talking AI right now. You could go and do hours and hours of presentation on this, and of course all of you would probably be sleeping if I did that to you. But this is a hot topic. There's a lot going on. We have visual generative tools. We have tools that are generating audio. So text, music, you name it, right? The thing is, I guess it seems like even mom has AI. There's a flurry of stuff going on out there. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with all these things, and it's been interesting to watch what's going on. There's going to be a lot to learn. There are going to be things that are going to be to our advantage to understand how to use, and there are going to be things that perhaps take over some of the more mundane tasks. All the more reason that we have to make sure that we are bringing our creativity to the table, that we are thinking, that we are doing things that these tools can't do on their own, because they are tools. They are useful in certain ways, but not necessarily meant to do everything that we do. But I do expect that we will see, just like we have with logo design, where you can either go pay someone $5 to do one, or you can have a tool like this generate a whole host of them for you to pick from. The quality isn't great sometimes, but it's going to get better. We're going to see that too with wireframes, right? They are, there are some folks that are going to continue to need stuff that's highly customized and are going to want to pay for that. And there are going to be people who are going to say, hey, just give me something that's easy to implement, or I'm going to go to Wix or Squarespace and I'm going to drag and drop things because that's easier. That is only good for certain problems. And so give yourself time and space to dream. You, as any designer, can show off neat, clean wireframes, and you need to be able to show that you could do that, right? And lots of us can show and flash corporate logos from past work. But this is what makes you stand out, right? Those creative leaps, that ability to go a step beyond what's obvious, those basic deliverables there, to the types of things that I was pointing out, for the types of things that case that Larry showed point out. It's like, it's going to be a long time before we have machines that are able to make those types of connections that go, oh, wow, people will really feel like this when I give them an opportunity to do that. That's a whole nother level of being able to understand human emotion and understand the things that motivate people to do what they do on the inside. Put that on display. Those kinds of creative leaps, when you see those types of opportunities, or you see places where those questions can and should be asked, do it. That's my best advice. Maybe not everybody is as hot on that as I am, but I can guarantee you, if nothing else, it will stand out, because all too often we see a lot of things that look very similar. And it's hard to separate out unless we get a chance to get face to face with someone and really get a sense of who they are and what they're capable of. So with that, I will wrap up and stop talking at you and see if there are questions that I can answer, or other things that I can expand upon here, or if you're all just like itching to get out in the sunshine while it's still out there.
So what we can do here is, if you want to raise your hand digitally or in the analog realm, that means turning your video on. We can take your questions that way, or put them into the chat and I'll relay them on to Brad. Although Brad, you can probably see the chat yourself. So either way, good time for asking questions. I'm looking for hands, not seeing hands. Oh, Andrew has
There's one.
your hand, Andrew. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot for presenting. Yeah, I was wondering, so for those of us here who are in the SVC UX certificate program, and portfolio presentation days will be coming up in a couple of months. Would you recommend that if any of us have the opportunity to apply a kind of outside world or out of the box or non-wireframe idea to our projects? Do you think we should go for that, or like, do you think like what's the value there?
I think that's an excellent question. First, I'll ask, I'm not familiar with your process exactly. So Larry, if I'm leading Andrew or anybody else down a path that doesn't fit with the way that you do things, let me know. But my personal recommendation with something like that would be, absolutely, if you have something that you can add to the mix that stands out, that shows your ability to think creatively. It doesn't have to be way out there. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't even have to really be a big idea. To me, it's more just the ability to see that, okay, here's something I created, and gosh, what if we could do this? Or, the challenge was this, and here's what I created. But it would really be interesting to see if we could also extend that in this direction, in that direction, and here's why. So if that fits within, the type of conversation that you're able to have, or what you're able to show, I wouldn't go too far off track with things. But I certainly wouldn't discourage including something different in there that's going to catch someone's attention.
Great, thank you.
And Brad, that's totally in line with our thinking. So rather than say wouldn't discourage, I would say I would encourage you to consider that. And to Brad's point, what's the right amount of your total presentation time to devote to something like that? I don't know, 15%, 20%, probably not more than that. Sorry, Ariana, go ahead.
Realize my raised hand is blending in, sorry. So Brad, I wanted to ask you, since you mentioned AI, have you currently thought about implementing that in your own workflow? And if so, have you ever discussed with a prompt engineer on like how you could work with the prompt engineer to kind of make it work for UX design?
Let's see, two parts to that question. In terms of someone who's specifically focused as a prompt engineer, no. We have, however, we do have license to use Midjourney here. Some of us do. We have a couple other tools that we're experimenting with. It is a very difficult space to figure out how to get our footing in and how much is the right amount. I think the most effective use I've seen so far has been to help generate ideas faster, maybe sparking more concepts and ideas in a more rapid manner. In terms of producing actual client deliverables, we have not taken that step yet. I have seen a couple instances where that has taken place. There are some legal issues around that, and some of our clients are a little unsure where that's going to go. But it kind of remains to be seen where it ends up. I personally don't necessarily think we're going to see a lot of really complex and involved campaign deliverables produced from that. But I do think that things that are frameworks and skeleton structures and things that can be produced by repetition and process will be seen coming out of there more and more. So did I answer your question, or did I miss it a little bit there?
No, that was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great question.
Daniel, take it away.
Yeah, so I like this concept of sort of leveraging these other touch points of a business to expand the impact of a set of digital deliverables. But I'm wondering if we have our portfolio with a series of projects already set, and we could come up with a concept to do just that, to expand, our project into the physical world or whatever it may be. Is it okay to add a small blurb to a case study on our portfolio that demonstrates that concept? Or would a hiring manager look at that and say, this is a great idea, like, why didn't you fully build that out?
Ooh. Wow, that is an excellent question and not easy to answer. And I certainly can't speak for everyone out there that might be reviewing your work. What I can say is first, I would definitely go back to the reason for doing this in the first place, which is what is this challenge? Why are we doing it? Who is it for? Right. And make sure that it's starting there. We don't want to tack on things just for the sake of doing them, of course, but it's that ability to connect those dots and have those things sprout from that foundation that is I think most important to be able to demonstrate. If you're asking about building something out completely, gosh, I can only say that you're going to see a lot of variation out there when it comes to the eyes that are looking at that, hiring managers and others who are reviewing things. Not everybody thinks this way. Not everybody is used to thinking this way. People at different levels and different organizations are going to have different perspectives on it. People in different roles. Certainly I've worked with people who are building, really business-oriented software where this would not really register or make a whole lot of sense unless you had something that was really close in, that say is going to make it easier or more appealing for someone to sit down at their desk and do something that they otherwise might put off till the end of the day, right? Things like that. But I think definitely putting some kind of blurb, some kind of footnote, some kind of anything at minimum, I think is good just to see if it catches interest. Building something out completely, I couldn't say. I certainly would be interested in seeing that in many cases, but it really depends on who it's going in front of, and the type of role that you're interviewing for. So there's probably not one answer to that.
If I can build on your answer, most of us are going to have a portfolio that's going to be a website, and hence it's very possible to tease your beyond the wireframe ideas as part of your digital case study and link to kind of the full up explanation of it on a secondary page. So it's there for people who are excited about stuff like that and ignorable for those who aren't.
That is an excellent point. And here I'm envisioning, I'm embarrassed. I'm envisioning my old paper portfolio. When you're talking about that, like, no. These portfolios are, yeah, of course. Yeah, if you have space for it and you have time for it, and that's how I would do it. Just as Larry suggested, is if it's available for those who are interested, it doesn't bog down someone who's looking for other stuff. Then if you can find a way to create that experience for them, then I think you're about as close to the mark as you can get.
Awesome. Thank you.
Right. Good question. Any other questions? Right. I think probably the predominant question is what's for dinner. So let's go find out. But I want to thank you all for joining us. Brad, can't tell you how much I appreciate this, because this is a message when it maybe comes from us. The natural reaction is, what do you guys know about this? So to hear from someone in your position supporting this notion of, expand your thinking, carries a lot of weight, and we are totally on board. So if you would, everybody, can we give Brad a digital or real world round of applause? I can.
I'm absolutely honored to have the opportunity and the invitation to be here with you. I do wish you all very well and hope to see you out there somewhere here or else. Otherwise, if you're here in the area or wherever you might be, but please go get some dinner, enjoy the sunshine. Or those of you who I saw were further east, get to bed.
Good advice. Always good advice. Thanks, everybody. And we're going to probably try to convince you, Brad, to share the deck with us, if that's okay.
Happily.
And then we'll send the link out to that tomorrow, I believe.
You got it.
Off you go.
Night, everybody.
Good night.